Every morning, Laura woke up exhausted, her feet caked in mud, with bruises she couldn't explain. Each mark on her skin felt like a puzzle piece, a fragment of a dream that had slipped through her fingers, leaving only confusion in its wake. The nights had become a battleground for her mind, a place where reality blurred with nightmares, and she found herself wandering through the darkness without a clue as to why. Her husband, James, watched her deteriorate with a sinking heart. The concern etched on his face deepened with each passing day. He felt helpless, standing by as the woman he loved slipped further into a state of disarray. The sleepwalking episodes had begun as mere disturbances, but they soon escalated into something more sinister. Laura would wake up in strange places, sometimes outside, sometimes in the living room, her eyes wide and unseeing, as if she were trapped in a world of her own making. To protect her, James took drastic measures. He installed security cameras around their secluded home, hoping that the footage would reveal the nature of her nighttime escapades. Each morning, he would review the recordings, searching for answers, but what he found only deepened his dread. One evening, as he sat in front of the screen, the blue light illuminating his worried features, he saw her. There she was, dressed in her nightgown, stepping out of their home as if in a trance. The night was thick with shadows, and the forest loomed behind them, dark and foreboding. Fear gripped him as he watched her walk deeper into the trees, her movements fluid yet eerie, as if she were being drawn by an unseen force. Driven by panic, James resolved to follow her the next night. He waited until she slipped into her sleepwalking state, then quietly slipped out of the house, keeping a safe distance behind her. The forest was alive with sounds, the rustling of leaves, the distant hoot of an owl, but all he could hear was the pounding of his heart. As they ventured deeper into the woods, James noticed a change in the atmosphere. The air grew thick, almost suffocating, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. Finally, they arrived at a clearing, and there stood an old, abandoned cabin he had never seen before. Its presence was unsettling, a relic of forgotten times, and it seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Laura stood before the cabin, motionless, her gaze fixed on something unseen. James approached her gently, careful not to startle her. When she turned to him, her eyes were wide open but unfocused, as if she was staring through him rather than at him. In a whisper that sent chills down his spine, she said, "It's watching." The words hung in the air, heavy with dread. James's mind raced, questions swirling like leaves caught in a whirlwind. What was watching? What had drawn her here? The unease settled deeper in his stomach as he realized something was fundamentally wrong. The next day, disturbed by Laura's cryptic message, James felt an overwhelming need to investigate the cabin. He approached it cautiously, the wooden door creaking ominously as he pushed it open. Inside, the air was stale, thick with dust and neglect. His eyes were drawn to the walls, covered in faded photographs that seemed to tell a story of their own. As he examined the images, his heart dropped. Each photograph depicted a person, their eyes scratched out with a violent hand, each marked with a date. The sense of dread intensified as he scanned the faces, and then he found it, Laura's picture, among the others, with today's date scrawled beneath it. Panic surged through him, a tidal wave of fear and confusion. He raced home, his mind a jumbled mess of thoughts and emotions. But when he arrived, the house felt empty, too quiet. Laura was gone. Night descended quickly, wrapping the world in darkness, and armed only with a flashlight, he plunged into the woods, calling her name into the void. The forest was a labyrinth, twisting and turning, but he pressed on, desperation fueling his search. At the cabin, he felt a chill run down his spine as he stepped inside. The photographs had changed. Laura's eyes were now scratched out, the same cruel hand that had marked the others now claiming her. Just then, the door slammed shut behind him, plunging him into darkness. The flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced along the walls. A whisper echoed through the dark, familiar yet haunting, "Now it watches you." James spun around, heart pounding in his chest. The voice was unmistakable, it was Laura's. But when he turned, it was her, standing behind him, awake yet still lost. In her hand, she held a rusted knife, its blade glinting ominously in the dim light. Her eyes were glazed and hollow, devoid of the warmth and love he had known. "Laura," he said, backing away slowly, trying to reach her. "Please, it's me." She smiled vacantly, stepping closer, her voice a chilling melody. "It sees everything. Now, it's your turn." The weight of her words settled heavily on him, and the realization struck him sharply. Laura had been sleepwalking under the influence of something dark, ancient, and evil. The cabin, the photographs, the forest, they were all part of a twisted game, and he was now a player in it. Outside, deep within the shadowed woods, something stirred, watching silently as the cabin consumed its latest victims. The trees whispered secrets, and the darkness thickened, hungry for more souls to ensnare. James felt the pull of something unseen, a force that beckoned him deeper into the night, promising answers but threatening to take everything he held dear. The cycle had begun anew, and he could feel the weight of the forest pressing in around him, waiting for the moment when he, too, would become part of its haunting tale.